So our agenda for today, we are driving institutional change using data. And so we're going to discuss that today, give you a case study of our successful program with Florida Atlantic University. Their first year connections team and their student affairs team has done a fantastic job in launching this program, and we're happy to share that information with you. And again, we'll have some time for questions at the end if there are any unanswered questions. My name is Michelle Burke. I'm a partner relations director here at Mentor Collective. I'm based in Michigan, but I'm actually a Florida native, so very happy to have been working with Florida Atlantic this year and working with our partners along the East Coast. Our partner success team is anytime you partner with Mentor Collective, there's a great group of professionals working behind the scenes for our programs. And on this program with Florida Atlantic, we have Erin Callison as our Senior Program Success Manager and Emily Boysha as our Partner Success Operations Associate. And both of them do amazing work to serve the students at Florida Atlantic. And I'd like to introduce my colleagues from FAU today, and I will let them introduce themselves. So we'll start with Dr. Fairman.
Good morning. Thank you everybody for joining us today. My name is Larry Fairman. I serve as the Vice President for Student Affairs at Florida Atlantic. I've been at Florida Atlantic for just about 24 years with varying responsibilities in University Housing, Student Union, Dean of Students, and now serving as the VP. Hope everybody enjoys our session today.
Great. And Jordan.
Hi, everyone. Happy Tuesday. I am Jordan DiPantima. I'm Director of New Student Transitions and Family Engagement, and have the pleasure of having one of the offices under our shop be the Mentoring Project. So we'll speak about what that is throughout today's session.
Great. Thank you. And Rebecca.
Good morning. My name is Rebecca Goldstein. I serve as the Director of Assessment and Research within the Division of Student Affairs just within the Division of Student Affairs.
That's big enough.
Yeah.
There's a lot to do, as you'll learn today when we talk about all this terrific data that we have. And it's been such a pleasure to have this team working with them. They care so much about their students and the success of students. And that's what I love about our work at Mentor Collective, is we do get to partner with more than 180 institutions across the country. Let's quickly start with an overview of Florida Atlantic. And Dr. Fairman, if you could let us know a little bit more about your institution.
Sure. So, as you can see from the slide, in fall of 2022, we had about 23,000 undergraduate students. If I take a look at the history of Florida Atlantic, our headcount has been roughly the same for about the last 10 years, but we have seen more and more students shifting from grad student to undergrad. And we've also seen a significant number of students start to move from our regional campuses to our Boca Raton campus. You can see that we have a high number of first-gen students, certainly a significant number of Pell eligible, and then that needle moving towards a majority of full-time students. One of the things that I think is unique about Florida Atlantic is that we're situated across 3 counties, and we cover about 120 miles of coastline, over 3 main campuses, and an additional 3 sites. And as some of you mentioned in the poll, we do see a number of increasing online students. Our first-year students enroll at 2 of our campuses, one up at Jupiter, which houses an honors college, and then our primary campus in Boca Raton. And then our Davie campus is primarily transfer. So where you can see that 86.7% of Florida residents, a lot of that is due to the geographic mileage that we cover. We do have a strong history of mentoring-related initiatives. This program culminated in an academic and student affairs collaborative effort. One of our cornerstones for the mentoring project was the First Year Connections program, which we historically direct toward all first-year students. We kind of consider all first-year students as being both our traditional first year, but also when you want to think about our AA transfers, that those students, we try to treat them more and more like a first-year student as we start to look at sense of belonging and whatnot, as we'll talk about later in the presentation. Due to the transition of leadership in both of our divisions, academic and student affairs, as well as the COVID-19 pandemic, our mentoring initiatives were really put to the side. And as we emerged from the pandemic, it became increasingly clear that that sense of belonging and that connectedness were initiatives that, as a university, we needed to focus on. And so in May 2021, the Mentor Collective reached out to us, and after discussions with our provost and our cross-functional student success analytics team, we did make the decision to pilot the program for fall 22 and spring 23. Our division had been allocated HERF dollars to put towards student success, and this pilot program was an ideal candidate to receive funds. You can see that really our predominant students are sitting in that traditional college age student. And so again, as we look at, we're not looking at as many students coming back from the workforce to college, or again, even that sense of, you know, a large number of non-traditional. We have become more and more of a first choice institution. And so with that being said, we had to shift some of our thinking towards a significant approach to first year, and again, those first year transfers. And so as you look at our overall data, we were really needed to take a look at the population utilized for our pilot study. And as we analyzed our data, we did determine that the most significant achievement gaps were those between men and women. We then looked at how we established our performance-based funding metrics based upon completion rate for AA transfers to state universities. So if you want to move to the next slide.
Sure.
When we take a look at our top priorities for student success, those are established by the State University System Board of Governors performance-based funding metrics. We situated this program in the Office of New Student Transitions and Family Engagement so that we would be able to look at this project as not only an initial examination, but we wanted to take a look at onboarding and all the way through that first year. Our first recruitment process looked at about 1,400 matches. It was our sense that most of our residential students had the opportunity to establish a peer relationship with their RA. And so we were really looking based upon our first generation males, our AA transfer males, and our commuter male identifying students as our first, you know, kind of tranche of students that we'd be looking at. And as that summer did turn to fall, we did widen our efforts to all first year and transfer students. So when you take a look at this slide specifically, we're really focused in on retention, the percentage of students who return for their second year at FAU. And while we measure that predominantly relative to first year students, we know that if we can track that for our AA transfers, that's going to then contribute to that 3-year AA or that 4-year FTIC graduation. Our historical data did show that students weren't leaving FAU after their first year due to academic reasons. And so for many, it was on that transfer to another state institution. And so we wanted to look at what our greatest impact would be, which is in assisting that student in finding their people and laying down roots. As we looked at graduation rate for students, again, 4-year graduation for FTIC and 3-year for AA transfers, we really wanted to look at how do we then further engage beyond the first year. And so as you look at this chart, we really start to look at focusing in not only on our mentees, who we're looking at for the retention lens, but our mentors, when we take a look at furthering that sense of belonging and giving them a sense of purpose as they contribute through and kind of paying it back, if you will, to the next set of students that are coming through. We also looked at leveraging financial support as an addition to sense of belonging, that financial struggle, especially when we take a look at the number of Pell eligible and first generation students that we have at Florida Atlantic, became increasingly apparent that we were also losing students through that. We see mentoring as kind of for that first year and transfer students in continuing to contribute to that degree of social mobility. And so as we take a look at mentoring, again, not only as an initiative for first year, but also in looking at how our skill building occur for our mentors, we believe that that's also going to make them more marketable as they take a look at graduating and looking at post-graduation, graduate school, or employment.
That's terrific. And Mentor Collective, through Mentor Collective, mentors do receive some training and they are certified as mentors and they can post that on their LinkedIn. It's a wonderful opportunity. And especially when we're serving students at scale, we're able to involve so many students as mentors and getting them engaged in those leadership roles. So thank you for that, those 3 pillars of how you want to serve students and meet that performance-based expectations of the state of Florida. The next step is asking, how are you taking that data-driven approach to identify the areas where you need investment? So you know you want to work with your first years, you know you want to work on social mobility, but how do you use that data?
Yeah. So when I was invited to be a part of figuring this out last spring around this time, that was the question that was supposed to be of who would be most impactful. And historically at Florida Atlantic University, we don't tend to have achievement gaps. Our Hispanic, Black, and white students graduate at about the same rates across the board. But as Larry mentioned, when you break it out by male and female, you really start to see some achievement gaps. And you really start to see there's a difference between a Black female graduating in 4 years versus a Black male graduating in 4 years. And that's where we started to realize we really want to focus on our men of color. And that was our first realization of these are the students who it might make a huge difference to. Additionally, when we look at retention, we see the same thing. We don't have much of an achievement gap between our students. They're all kind of retaining at the same rate along the way. But we are seeing that our men are historically having a lower retention than our women. And that kind of gave us, again, that push of saying, let's focus on our men. How can we help them connect to someone? And what can we do to help them retain? The other part we looked into, as Larry talked a little bit about already, was our on-campus and commuter students. So historically, we had always seen our commuter students having a higher retention rate than our non-on-campus students. But right around the time of the pandemic, that started shifting around. We started to see our commuter students' retention rate go down. In addition, we're also dealing with some other challenges in South Florida. We have an increased demand for housing across the board. We've also been increasing our first year enrollment class size, and that's putting a limit on how many students have the opportunity to even live on campus. Not every one of our first year students do. About 40% choose not to or are not able to because there isn't enough space for them. As Larry said, as Jordan will talk about, we realized that when we don't have students living on campus, they don't have access to the RAs in the same ways as our residential students. And we were like, a mentor could really take away some of that issue and help have that peer-to-peer connection. So again, the data kind of drove us to say commuter students, men of color, first-gen students as well. But those are the populations we really thought we should focus in on.
Fantastic.
So,
And
yeah.
again, talking about that under the radar. So you say, oh, we don't have gaps, but you can look at when you disaggregate the data, you can see some things. But then there's also those students who aren't your typical high risk student, and you still want to look to retain them. So let's talk a little bit more about that under the radar student and how we support them.
Yeah, so our commuter students are definitely under the radar. Our commuter students come in equally to our residential students. When we look at our predictive modeling, there are equal numbers of commuter students who are highly likely to retain, middling likely to retain, low likelihood to retain. But maybe they're under the radar because we're not going to find them that way. What we are seeing is that increased cost of living and that increased housing demand determines who is able to get housing. The increase in overall enrollment, it determines who's able to get housing. And then we also see our commuter students, even if they come in on the orientation survey saying, I want to get involved, I'm excited to get involved, they don't have that same likelihood of getting involved. And that's part of the commuter experience. We know from some of our follow-up surveys with students that they're less likely to feel the same sense of belonging at FAU because of that commuter experience. And they're less likely to have a connection point where they're able to say, this is someone who I can go to, than our residential students. And finally, our commuter students are slightly more likely to be working full-time or taking care of families or have some other responsibilities that our residential students do not have. But our male students are enrolling in college at a lower rate than our female students, period. FAU is about 55% female and about 45% male. So we know we are just a female dominant school. That trend has been increasing for us. Our men are persisting, retaining, and graduating at a lower rate. Additionally, our men are less likely to be involved in student activities or programs on campus. They're less likely to show up in campus leadership position, but they're not more likely to be commuters. So that was something we initially thought, well, maybe our men aren't living with us on campus, but our residential population is pretty even male-female. So they aren't more likely to be the commuter group. they're just less likely to be an involved group on campus. We had some previous outreach specifically for men of color that we had tried in the past, and it had shown that men of color were particularly willing to do mentorship or find connections through mentorship. And we were like, this could be a good way to scale this up, particularly using the Mentor Collective platform, where FAU didn't have to provide all the resources, that we could work with this as a partnership. And that's where we really thought Mentor Collective could be a good partner for us, for our men of color.
That peer-powered platform really does make a difference. And I want to talk a little bit about just recent news from the U.S. Surgeon General. So even beyond Florida Atlantic, but nationwide, we know that post-pandemic, our young people are facing this epidemic of loneliness. They have the starkest decline in social connection of any age group. And we know that it's those social connections that can make a real difference. So from the Surgeon General's report, they outline ways that young people can gain that social connection that's really important, that has the structure, the function, and quality to give young people that positive experience of social connections. And mentorship is highlighted as one of those things. And so to be able to offer this at scale to all of your new students, it's helping with that problem of the loneliness epidemic, not just for your mentees, but as Larry referred to, getting those mentors engaged as well. So we're happy at Mentor Collective to be able to contribute to a positive solution for the loneliness epidemic. So taking a look at this peer-powered platform and making those first-year connections, I'd love for Jordan to tell us more about how the mentorship program has worked at FAU.
Yeah, thank you. So just quickly, our summary, I mean, our numbers are pretty incredible from year one. We went in with some ambitious numbers and surpassed most of our goals. Our 1,400, as Larry shared before, is really our capacity, and we hit that pretty quickly on in the semester. And as Rebecca shared, we widened our scope as the semester went on, just because we were realizing that male students in general across our university were highly interested in what we were serving. So they became our main target pretty early on. But this next piece is when I'll talk about some of our recruitment. Michelle, if you can hit the next slide.
And you have been able to do this in the past. You had some efforts where you kind of did this by hand, but how is it different working with the Mentor Collective platform?
Yeah, so recruitment was, I would say, hands down the most strategic undertaking of this entire process. We looked at the semester leading to our launch, and we started with a big goal and then worked our way backwards. Each week really focused on a specific population with specific intentional messaging that was really hand tailored towards the student in which we were targeting. Our techniques varied, as you can see in this chart. For example, we used email and texting, and then we didn't use our mentoring account. We started using a more personalized approach. So although that may sound overwhelming, sending this many emails from your personal email account, it really worked. In the timeline, we didn't really go wider until our launch date. So those targeted emails had some messaging that was like, hey you, we're talking to you, and this is me, a real person behind the screen. And we really saw our numbers increase from there. And then the student quote part, I know I cut Michelle off, but I think this is important to know. I say this a lot to our students, specifically our orientation leaders, but we think it matters most when they say it versus when we do. It's amazing when students listen to other students. So these next couple of slides that Michelle covers really talks about it from the student firsthand.
And these are volunteers. These are students who give of their time to help other students, to help the university, to give back to that community. And that's what's so amazing about this program, that you are able to scale it up because you do have that critical mass of available students to mentor others. And we can see here, why are they volunteering? It's because they want to help somebody, maybe either in a way that they did get helped or maybe they didn't get helped, and they want to help others overcome those obstacles. And it's just, this is one of my favorite parts of Mentor Collective, is to see these testimonial quotes from our student participants. You can see first generation students want to help others. There's that unwritten curriculum of navigating the college experience that's so important, and mentors, your students, want to help each other through that. And let's take a look at this holistic view. So using MC data, using your institutional data, how are you able to get a broader picture of your student experience using the data that's available to you?
Yeah, we were able to meet the students where they were much earlier on in the semester, I would say. In the first week of classes alone, we were able to look at demographics, colleges, conversations, which I'll go deeper into in a moment. But you can see just from the peak on the screen, that early intervention really started at the kickoff of our semester for us. And then, Rebecca, I don't want to steal any of your shine here if you have more to add.
That's fine. Michelle, if you could go back one slide, I'm
Oh, yeah,
sorry.
sure.
So as Joy mentioned, we were able to kind of see things happening in real time. You see like that big spike where we were seeing academic struggles happening around midterms. And we were able to know, I mean, we kind of already know academic struggles are going to happen around midterms, but we were able to help the mentors respond. One of the more interesting ones was in July, there's a spike that happened with housing or food insecurity. This came because we were implementing a hotel program, and the first year students were getting notified, hey, you're going to live in a hotel. And they were reaching out to their mentors immediately saying, what does this mean that we're going to live in a hotel? We were able to provide the mentors with extra information about saying, this is what it means, so they could keep reinforcing that message from the university and helping the students make that adjustment in real time. We wouldn't have we had an idea that the students had questions because we were getting calls in the housing office, but we wouldn't have known who else they were talking to because of the flagging that the mentors were doing, and the mentors being like, hey, this sounds strange. Can someone help me address this question? We were able to address the question in multiple avenues, which also helped the traffic in our housing office at the same time.
Controlling that chatter of gossip when you have a major change going on campus. It's so important to have the right information out to the right people. And so to know that those kind of conversations really helped you and to see those trends is really exciting.
And these are the conversations I was alluding to earlier in this section. If you just take a look at August, the intervention that this was able to provide us to give support to our students who are looking for it. And some weren't even looking for it. Their mentor said they would need it. And that became really critical for us. We worked really closely with the Dean of Students Office, our financial aid office, and I would also say our undergraduate advisors, to give a more personalized support to students, whereas before it may have been that too late circumstance in their student journey for them not wanting to come back to Florida Atlantic. So Rebecca and I met daily, hourly in the first week of August. We joked that we should just have connecting offices at one point in the first week of the semester because we were in touch so often, because this gave us a new look and a new insight into our students that we hadn't had this early on before.
So from actionable student insights, let's take a look at just your institutional success strategy overall. Using those peer insights, using the flags that are filed about specific issues regarding individual students, looking at conversation logs, looking at how you're able to integrate what's happening for your students with the services that are available on campus. Can you talk a little bit more about how you were able to inform the other parts of campus about the mentorship program, and that it went maybe a little even further than your typical idea of mentorship?
Yeah, these next two slides are two of my favorite because it just gives a snapshot of what we were able to do as part of this process. So the Dean of Students interventions, I briefly mentioned them as a partner, but those were really critical in the impact, I would say, that we saw in the first week. we hosted a lunch and learn with all of the various category option representatives you see on the screen for our flags in the system. And during that lunch and learn, we co-hosted that with Mentor Collective, and we determined a point of contact for each area. And then that point of contact served as an immediate liaison to the student to really get them the resources they required. So it wasn't just, hey, email Dean of Students at fau.edu, someone will be in touch with you. It was a literal human that they could connect with. And then that person saw the follow-up with them, served as a resource beyond just their mentor in the first semester.
Great.
And then this one is my personal favorite. One of the points of pride I really would say with Mentor Collective is getting the student feedback directly from them. And looking at just the qualitative data like this, our peer mentors log some of these real flags that you're seeing. And then that liaison was immediately able to intervene. So the concern that scholarships might not cover all costs of school, financial hardships in the family, that particular student had a meeting with financial aid in that same week and then was able to actually stay at Florida Atlantic because of the intervention that was provided so early. So these are just some of the examples, but meetings like that were happening very, very frequently in the first month of school.
So the insights from mentor flags help our partner institutions help students find those help-seeking behaviors. So knowing where to go, even a mental health concern, a lot of times students will talk to a peer about their mental health issues, but not take it to that next level to get professional assistance through a counseling center or through a dean of students. And to be able to nudge that student along, getting them to seek out those helpful resources that are available to them goes a long way to each student who's retained. And beyond that, we have MC data, we have institutional data. So what is your institutional data showing about student success in this first year of the program?
I mean, it's showing good things. This is the exciting part. So we pulled, the nice thing with Mentor Collective's data was we could pull out the data and merge it with our own data. So we looked at who was in Mentor Collective versus who was not, and we looked at their fall to spring persistence. And this is what we found. We only looked at our full-time students. That's why this number is a little bit off from what you've seen elsewhere. But when we look at like our FTICs, we see that there's about a 2% difference between the persistence of the students who are in mentoring and the students who aren't. We'd already done a chi-square on these students to see, are they different? And they really weren't different than our regular students. We had pulled a really good sample of students who had a high prediction of retaining, students who had a low prediction of retaining, but we were seeing across the board that our Mentor Collective students were retaining, persisting at a higher rate. So this was really exciting for us, particularly when we looked at like our male population, because that was an area we were particularly interested in, our commuter population. And we saw those persistence numbers that told us we're starting to retain some of the students who may not have otherwise retained with us.
So what's next for first year connections? We actually are doing some things with the program. So let us know what's happening with that for Jordan and Rebecca and Larry.
So, I mean, I'm going to start off, but, you know, I think for us, I mean, this has been, you know, very exciting. We were looking at something to pilot and an opportunity to better to integrate our students back into the community as we were coming out of the pandemic. And I think that while we intended that there would be some success, obviously, I don't think that we anticipated that would be as strong as it was. When I talk to parents and families and students at each of our orientations, I give a live welcome to all of them. You know, I tell them, you know, first to second year retention, we want to see you graduate in 4 years or less. We want you to leave here with a job letter or a letter of admission to graduate school. And we want you to have meaningful and memorable experiences. So those are the things that I really focus on. And given our commitment to social mobility as an institution, we knew that this was going to have some opportunity for us to deliver on what we promise. And, you know, based on this success in terms of retention, we've now received a multi-divisional commitment to the point that even our CFO's office has come to the table and said, you know what, we can help to contribute to this program as well. Student Affairs started funding it. Academic Affairs, when they saw what was going to be happening, they added to it. And Financial Affairs, seeing our return on investment, really said, you know what, we're going to contribute to this as well. We're not just going to totally put it on Academic and Student Affairs. And so the exciting part is that we anticipated a 3-year pilot, and after a 1-year pilot, we're institutionalizing this program. We're going to increase the number of pairs to provide most of our first year and transfer students with an opportunity to participate. There are a few exceptions due to some established programs which are supported by a mentoring council, which First Year Connections is a significant part of. We also intend to establish a more intentional relationship between the mentor experience and the NACE competencies. Our MC partners, mentioned the data that they do collect about mentors and the training that they provide, but we really want to see and investigate the impact on serving as a mentor on graduation rate, on job placement, as well as salary post-graduation. The state performance funding metrics looks not only at job placement, but also with a minimum salary. And so the more and more that we can show mentoring is not only a retention initiative, but also how it contributes to graduation rate and salary and job placement for our mentors, we think that there will be even further reach. Our hypothesis is that by investing in mentors, it's going to enhance their experience. And so in effect, that will then trickle down in increasing the efficacy of the program for the mentees. And really, as Jordan alluded to, like many institutions, we are finding ourselves with higher demand for on-campus housing than we can provide. And so we are specifically analyzing the data related to student satisfaction with college experience for those students that initially applied for housing and didn't receive it. And so we're hoping that we're going to be able to flesh out and show that if a student does not receive housing, but that they do enter into a mentoring relationship, that their satisfaction is higher, as well as contributing to their retention versus the student that did not receive housing within their first year.
Fantastic. And Jordan and Rebecca, anything on your end that's new for the program?
Just to add on to Dr. Fairman's comments, I think it's also important to note we shared early on that 1,400 we thought was an ambitious goal, and it turned out not to be so ambitious. It really was exciting to our students. And so for the program specifically, this past year, we had our first year students mixed in with our transfer students in the same program. And next year, we'll be expanding it into, in Mentor Collective terms, 2 dashboards. One to track our transfer student engagement and one to track our first year student engagement. So we're excited to expand on transfer connections in this next year and see how that may grow given more intentional support of that area.
That's wonderful. And one thing we are able to do, and we've shown you snippets of the administrator dashboard and how that data is available in real time, those actionable insights on mentors and mentees, what they're talking about, what the student concerns are. When we run 2 programs, one for your first time in college students and one for transfer students, we're able to even track at a more granular level for each student and see how it's going. And so that's an advantage to having our programs available. And I'm very excited that we're able to offer this to all of your incoming students coming up this fall. It's really exciting. Rebecca, any other thing on the data front that you're excited about?
Yeah. So, once we hit September, October, we'll actually be able to measure retention. We've been measuring predictive retention. We've been able to measure persistence. We've even looked at registration for classes ahead of time, but we haven't actually gotten to measure the impact on retention yet because the students still have to retain with us. So that's really exciting for us to start plugging it into a retention model to really see what the impact is moving forward. We're also going to be looking at the sense of belonging and academic efficacy surveys a little bit more in the next year and using those insights along the way, specifically how students think they want to engage, and then following up in the mid-year, in the end of year to see what's happening. And that goes into some of our other sense of belonging ways that we're trying to engage students. One thing we haven't mentioned is in the first year, we were only able to do the pairs before the start of school. This year, we will be able to also pair students after school has begun when they come to Jordan's office, because they're not going to come to me, or when a parent calls Dr. Fairman and says, my student doesn't have a friend, and they can't figure out what's going on, that this is an intervention strategy we'll be able to use on the fly to say, let's get your student paired up with a mentor, and be able to do that. We're also looking at offering mentoring to our Spring Start students as another group who could benefit from this. This year, we were only able to offer it to our summer and fall starts. So those are some other populations who we're excited to be able to have mentoring benefit them.
Fantastic. And finally, what do you want your peers to take away from this conversation? And let's start with Dr. Fairman.
Sure. I've spent a lot of time on speaking about how, FAU strives to compete relative to our performance-based funding metrics, but I do want to draw a little bit of attention to, US News Top 100, and that's certainly a goal of Florida Atlantic's as well. Each of our state university system Board of Governors performance-based funding metrics does ultimately feed into US News and World Report. We look at 4 years. US News in many ways looks at 6 years. And we've always known that mentoring is a high impact practice. But now what we're doing as a division is to take that mentoring and we're entrenching it into our divisional goals and our strategic planning so that we're able to articulate for each department within the Division of Student Affairs that this is an opportunity for an intervention, the way that Rebecca spoke to. And that could be when they're meeting with one of our psychologists in our counseling and psychological services, potentially when they're meeting with one of our physicians and student health services. So the more and more that we can embed this as a divisional goal and as a divisional value, we think that there will be that ongoing return. I really want other senior student affairs officers to know, first and foremost, that mentoring works. But again, most people know that. What the Mentor Collective, allowed us to do, and Jordan alluded to this, we were able to shift the logistics away from our staff. When we think about when we used to do the linking and the pairing, we would be doing this in July, August, which really for most divisions, including a Division of Student Affairs, is the most planning intensive time of the year. Our staff are either getting ready for housing move-in, or they're continuing with orientation, or our student engagement staff are planning their weeks of welcome programming. Everything else that we are needing to do, that by moving this, the pairing off of our full-time staff's plate, our staff members continue to be able to focus on the relationship aspects and the connectedness aspects, and not, driving through Excel spreadsheets to try to make these pairs. It also enables the mentor and the mentee to be paired in a meaningful way that I think contributes to that degree of sense of belonging. And what am I looking for in a mentor, instead of just going into it without any real data and just saying, okay, who wants to be mentored and who wants to be a mentor? And so I think that intentionality and that pairing is what helps to contribute to the success of this program. And again, as mentioned, the data platform gives us immediate insight into the progress of our students. I mean, we have many different areas that we can pull data on when we're looking at student progress, or even when we're looking at a student of concern and a behavioral intervention technique. The more and more data that we have at our fingertips, and we can triangulate that data, we can see if a student is, if this is normative for the student or if this is a one-off. It just allows us to really continue to move our student away from just being a student ID number, and really to having a holistic relationship with this student from the time that they enroll at Florida Atlantic all the way through graduation.
And that may have just answered this question that we have from the audience, but how does the data and the insights from the platform facilitate campus conversations and collaboration between the offices? Do you feel that having Mentor Collective has helped increase those connections with the other academic affairs units and some other support units on campus?
I mean, certainly, and I think, Jordan might be able to speak to this in a little bit more detail than I do, but I think that from a perspective of at least the Dean of Students intervention, they take that flag, and we're a Maxian school, so Jordan is able to monitor the flag, and then she's able to then create a Maxient report so that we're able to have that conversation with that student, but that ultimately that's becoming a part of that student's overall kind of history at Florida Atlantic. And we use Maxient not only for our conduct process, but for our care services as well. When we take a look at some of our students that are food insecure and housing insecure, and we're also able to link that through our student success platform regarding advising. And so all of these areas really focus in that when we have our student of concern committee, and I think one of the things that's different about our student of concerns committee is that we're not just a behavioral intervention team. We really take a look at a student that's rising relative to an anomaly in their academic progress, or if they've not gone to several advising appointments. We don't just kind of say, oh, they're a no-show, but we really try to put together the puzzle pieces of that holistic student experience to contribute, to their progress at Florida Atlantic.
Wow.
I would also add from a recruitment standpoint,
Oops.
Oh, you went on mute.
any of the data that Rebecca pulled for us, the personal emails in the recruitment timeline were not just sent from my email or Rebecca's email. We would hand the first generation list to our director of first generation student success. He would be able to then make a connection with those students and serve as an introduction, and we recommend you immediately sign up for this. And then they were able to get more than just the mentor piece of it, but also someone at the university. So from a recruitment stance, there were emails going out left and right from different departments across campus, some within student affairs, some outside of student affairs. We had some of the college advisors reach out to their specific advised students with the recommendation. And Michelle, you mentioned earlier that the mentors, our peer mentors, are not paid for this experience. That never even came up with any of the mentors that applied for the program. Many of them asked us if they could log their service hours, and we do notate that on their transcript, but payment was never asked across the board. If we got that question, it was very one-off, just, hey, is this an option? But it didn't stop them from applying for the program. Most of them were doing it because of some of the quotes you saw. They saw it as an opportunity to be someone for somebody else that they didn't have themselves.
Fantastic. And just very happy to have you join us today. Thanks to everyone who participated. And you can learn more by visiting us at our website, mentorcollective.org. But thanks so much to my colleagues from Florida Atlantic. Great opportunity to work with you today. We'll see you next time.